Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book Whiskey and Yoga, no other than Mr. David Richards.
Daniel, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to speak with you.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. David, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. So, I was a Marine Corps officer. I served 15 years on active duty. I was a corporate executive at Cisco Systems. I became a yoga instructor, and I've written now 4 books, two of which have become number one international bestsellers. And my next book comes out in May.
Mr. David Richards, thank you so much for sharing your best selling books to the world. So, whiskey and yoga, what is the main message?
This book is about finding your purpose in life. And up until 2017, when I read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, I didn't really think of my life as having a purpose. And when I read that book and he asked, "What is the purpose of your life?" I was blown away. Just the
Hmm.
idea that there was some reason for my existence that I could claim. So I had been writing and attempting to finish a horror story for 11 years. I wanted to be the next Stephen King. And I realized in that moment I wasn't going to write horror stories anymore. So I wrote a 10 chapter outline, and in October of 2017 published Whiskey and Yoga, helping people find their purpose in life. And I'm happy to say that the book has helped people transform their lives and make significant changes for the better.
So, Mr. David, how does the book blend philosophy, mindfulness, and self improvement?
Yeah, so it's really understanding that it all starts with the questions you ask yourself and how you talk to yourself, because questions are the answers. And if you don't think your life has a purpose, then you're going to be chasing the next happiness thing, the next thing that's going to make you feel pleasure for a moment. It's really about orienting yourself to the hero's journey. And every one of us has a hero's journey inside of us. We have to go on that calling and make our life an adventure. But it really comes down to the questions that you ask. And as you become more mindful of how you talk to yourself, you start to realize that there is a conversation you can have with yourself that helps you grow. And you challenge yourself to grow as you get oriented to there's something greater inside of me. And if it's true in me, then it's got to be true in everyone else as well. And so that's how you help then connect with people by helping them shift their lives as well.
Yes, beautifully articulated, Mr. David. Very well said. So, what role does storytelling play in the author's approach, or as you as an author, to self-discovery?
Storytelling, I heard recently, I was listening to Dr. Jordan Peterson's latest book. And in the book and in other venues, I've heard him say that it is a scientific fact that we need to understand our life as a story. And what you realize is when you tell a story, for example, if I told you about going to school when I was younger, you're going to think back to when you were younger and you went to school. So stories are how we relate to one another. And if I tell you a story where I struggled really for a long time with something, whether it's studying with math or writing or publishing a book or trying to get healthy with my eating or something like that, we can all relate to those kind of stories. And so stories are a great vehicle for teaching lessons to people. And that's actually a methodology that people practice. You tell a story, something that happened to you, an experience. People start to listen and tune into a similar experience they've had in their life. You teach them something from that story, and then you give them actions they can take in their own life.
Definitely. So, what are the some key lessons of the book teaches?
As I said earlier, it's really about asking questions. So you need to figure out what your questions are. And the other thing that really helped me become a writer was writing with pen and paper. In this day and age, there's so much technology. We're inundated with people vying for our attention on social media, YouTube, the television,
Yes.
everything. And when I wrote my first ever life purpose statement, after I read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, I grabbed a notebook and a pen and I wrote, "The purpose of my life is to help people find their purpose in life." And at that moment, it was true. And that was what gave birth to Whiskey and Yoga. Over the years, I've since modified that purpose statement. And more importantly, as I wrote book number two, and specifically book number three, I journaled thousands of pages. And part of that is to develop a relationship with yourself, you have to be able to communicate with yourself. And journaling is a really powerful way to do that because it forces you to have a conversation with yourself and get clear on who you are, what you believe, and what you value. At the same time, there's a great saying that what you write is what you invite. So if you want to get clear on creating and shaping your future and building a life of your dreams, putting those things on down on paper is powerful. That absolutely transformed my life and gave me clarity on how to proceed, not just in writing my books, but how I wanted to live my life. So, writing is a huge component to being able to compose your thoughts and speak articulately, not just to yourself, but to other people as well.
Certainly. Think and Grow Rich People is highly recommended to read. So please
Absolutely.
do read it if you have time. So, Mr. David, what does the book challenge traditional ideas about success and fulfillment?
Part of the reason I wrote this book was we get stuck in this loop of life. And if you've read Dr. Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural, he talks about it. We think 70,000 thoughts a day. The challenge with that is 90 to 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts you had yesterday. So if you live the same day, day after day, it's you're kind of living Groundhog Day. And in order to interrupt your own pattern or break out of that, you need to do something differently. You need to constantly challenge yourself to grow. That's reading and listening to other people's perspectives on things. It's keeping your mind and body fit. And part of that is coming from the place of you always want to be growing because everything either grows or it dies. There's no stagnation. Stagnation is leading to atrophy. So you need to constantly challenge yourself. At the same time, don't get too comfortable in routines because that's when you become subconscious and unconscious to what you're doing. You want to stay active and alert. And part of that is mindfulness and what I call pattern interrupt, where one of the things I learned really quickly to break my own pattern was, and I still do it to this day, is a lot of times before I would say 2017, I would get in my car and the AC would be on all the time. I'd turn it off and the AC would still be on. And then I said, you know what? Every time I get in the car, I'm going to turn the AC off because it's something I consciously have to think about. And so I do it every single time. And it's just a stop that makes me think about this is something I need to focus on. So just those little things to interrupt our patterns leads us to being more mindful. And as a yoga instructor, mindfulness is the name of the game.
Certainly. Totally agree, Mr. David. What does the title Whiskey and Yoga symbolize in the journey of self discovery?
So I had written, as I said, for 11 years, I was trying to become the next Stephen King and I wanted to write horror stories. And I had a bunch of different titles and I would write 110 pages or 120 pages at a time. And then the characters would get flimsy and it was just so frustrating. And I did this for 11 years and I just couldn't get over that hump. So for
Mm.
Christmas in December of 2016, because I was a yoga instructor and I also liked scotch at the time, someone gave me a whiskey and yoga T-shirt for Christmas. And I thought that's pretty cool. I like it. I understand the irony of it. And then I read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, discovered I had a purpose, and I set my name at Whiskey and Yoga. And it was initially because it made sense. It just automatically came to me. And then as I started writing, I said, well, how can I put those two things together? Like, how do you actually connect them besides just a funny T-shirt? And so I thought about it for a while and I said, well, they both tell the story of a spirit. Whiskey, the spirit is in a cask and it ages for, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 40 years. I actually bought, when Whiskey and Yoga came out, I bought a 42-year-old bottle of scotch. And I told myself, if it goes to number one, I will drink a glass of this scotch. So there's the journey of the whiskey and a keg. And then yoga talks about the journey, the spiritual journey in the body. I thought, okay, that's pretty good. I can make that connection. There's an actual reason why these two things exist, as contrary as they are, and that's where the title came from.
Interesting indeed, Mr. David. So, what make this different from other self-help book or personal development books, just like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill?
Yeah, this book is only, I haven't looked at it recently. It's only about 142 pages and is written very simply because I was still learning what it meant to be a writer. But in that way, it's very accessible. And because it's only 142 pages, you can read it in a weekend. And what's beautiful about it is each chapter is only 3 or 4 pages, and it gives one specific lesson or takeaway in each chapter. And that allows you to sit with it, review it, digest it, process it, and then make changes in your life. And I've had people who have left corporate jobs and gone on to start their own business in real estate. I've had people who've said this has completely transformed my life. So it's really simple and accessible. And what I've come to appreciate is, even though it was my first book, it's brought the most value to people because the messaging in it is so easy to grab.
So let's talk about finding purpose and personal growth, Mr. David.
Yeah.
What exercises or practices does the book suggest for discovering one's purpose?
The first thing you have to do is ask yourself the question. If you don't ask yourself the question, you can't get an answer. And I did. I remember I said, what is the purpose of my life? And that's when it came to me. The purpose of my life is to help people find their purpose in life. And it sounded so like, well, that's so simple, but it led me to write that book. And I know that book changed lives. You have to ask yourself the question. If you ask a compelling and quality question to yourself, you will get an answer. That is just the way the mind works. You constantly, I did this, I'll just give you another example without going too far into detail, since it's not about, we're not talking about that book. But in my third book, I had the idea for my third book in October of 2019. And I started writing it in about January, February, just kind of ideating it and putting some ideas down. And then towards the end of March, I'd written the first chapter. And then the pandemic went in full swing, and I completely went in a different direction with the book. It took me 2 years basically to figure out what the title was. And I remember I'd go through a title, and some titles would last for like a week. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. And other titles would last an hour. And for me, writing a book, I can't write the book without the title, because for me, the title is the first outline of the book. And so from October of 2019, it took me until November of 2021. And I remember I was so frustrated. I asked myself out loud, I'm like, what is this? What is this? And the title came to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. So you have to ask yourself the question. Asking yourself powerful questions leads to powerful answers.
Interesting, Mr. David. So, how does the book encourage readers to break free from limiting belief?
Yeah, you have to realize that the beliefs you hold shape your reality. And in fact, I just went to listen to or to see Dr. Jordan Peterson speak last night. He was here in North Carolina, and he talks about we now scientifically know that how you perceive the world measures your reality, is a measure of your belief in reality. And that is shaped by your beliefs. And what often happens to people is they get stuck because they want to grow and expand, and they have this inclination to do so, but because the box they've made for themselves about what they believe, it's keeping them closed in. And you kind of have to realize what ends up happening is people either get so frustrated that they say, okay, I'm not doing this anymore, and they make a radical change, and then the box breaks, and they see, oh, there's a bigger box, there's a bigger view. And what you come to realize is whatever you resist persists. So if you have an area of your life that you're neglecting because you don't want to get to it, because you don't want to go to the gym tomorrow, or because you really like sweets, or because you can't stop vaping, whatever the case may be, the longer that persists, it's going to keep flagging itself until you figure out, how do I overcome this and become more. And so overcoming limiting beliefs is starting to understand, what is the box that I have painted my life in, and how do I see a bigger box? How do I create a bigger box? And then you realize eventually there is no box. It's just, how grand a view of life can I perceive and take in? And that's when you really start to go down a path that's closer to what I would consider as enlightenment.
So, what is the importance of resilience and adaptability in finding one's purpose?
It's not always easy. It's not always, and that's part of the journey, right? If we, in this day and age with social media and instant gratification, it's kind of amazing. I
Yes.
mean, in some ways, I was talking to someone over the weekend. I did an interview, and we're both around the same age. And I said, I can imagine that when you and I were growing up, if I wanted to find something out, it could take me weeks, because I would have to go to the library, and if they
Yes.
had a book that had the answer to the question that I was asking, but that could involve a car ride, it could involve like other people. I mean, it was a whole product. And what you realize, that is something that we can answer instantly now. So it's remarkable in that sense. The great part is, when you really and truly understand that your life is the ultimate hero's journey, because it's only the journey that you can take, you realize you want to find kind of the worthy opponents in your life, the big challenges that are going to challenge you to grow, because that's all growth happens outside of the edge of our comfort zone. So you want to get to that place where you're really challenged. You want a worthy opponent that's going to force you to grow. Initially, sometimes what happens is that opponent will kick us on our butt and we're overcome. We're like, oh, I'm not doing that again. And then you realize, no, that is the call. The opportunity is become bigger, become more, and contribute more values to the planet.
Very well said. Mr. David, very well
Thank
said.
you. Thank you.
So, what would be your advice for those people out there that they want to motivate themselves?
I wouldn't look at it as motivation. I would look at it as holding yourself to a higher standard. When you say, I'm not going to accept less than my best, and every day you wake up not saying, oh, I have to get out of bed again or I have to go to work, but say, how do I contribute more today than I did yesterday? How do I become more? How do I become the best version of myself that I can be today? Again, if you ask those questions of yourself, you will get an answer. It may not be directly the one that comes to you through your conscience, but the day will manifest in a way and reveal itself in a way where you find that answer. And you get to the point where you realize it's not about taking the easy path. It's about becoming the greatest version of yourself that you can aspire to be. And the more you realize that is the journey, whatever you believe the journey to be, the more you realize you want to become as great a version of yourself as you really can.
Yes. So, what would be your short term and long term goals in writing?
So my next book, I really want to see it on the New York Times bestseller list. I've just started to build out the website for it with my publishing team, and really impact the planet. I've put really, I've written since the pandemic. I've written 4 books. One has been published. One's about to be published. The other 2, I kind of realized I wrote for me, but that was about 800 pages of writing for me to figure out how to write this next book. Um, and then really it's continue writing, because as I said earlier, and even Dr. Peterson mentioned this in his talk last night, you realize once you really understand how to communicate with yourself and how to write effectively, it's power. Because the more effectively and more coherently you can structure your ideas and thoughts, it's not just about how you communicate with yourself, it's about how you communicate with other people. And when you realize the power and the potency of being able to speak with passion and speak with integrity, it transforms the planet. We all have been around great speakers, whether it's Simon Sinek or Tony Robbins or Jordan Peterson, take your pick. But anyone who can speak with passion and authority and conviction, we get captivated by their engagement because they're so in tune with what they're speaking about. And to me, that is a direct byproduct of my writing. Like I mean, if you had told me during the pandemic that I would journal 1,000 pages over 2 years just to come up with a title for a book, I would have laughed. And now I realize that process made me a much better writer. When I look at the book that's about to come out, it's in some ways it's phenomenal. I got physical copies of it this weekend from my publisher, and I'm just blown away by how beautiful it is. So I plan on keeping the writing going, because there's a power to that. When you start to really organize your thoughts and your identity from inside, there's a real power in that. So long term is publish continually as I come up with more ideas that I feel are relevant and impactful for people. And I do actually, I met with someone from Hollywood last week, and we were talking about turning one of my books into a screenplay. So that's another, I'd say that's probably a shorter term goal, because I want to work on that in here in the next month.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. David, and thank
Thank
you
you,
for
Daniel.
your advice.
Thank you, Daniel.
Looking forward for more and more empowering books to come. So, how can someone apply the lessons from Wisgen Yoga in their personal and professional life?
Yeah. Ask yourself the question, what is your purpose in life? Your life has a purpose. Your life has a meaning. You get to define that. No one can define it for you. People will help you figure out what it is, but that's the journey. That is the beautiful journey. Start a journaling practice, even if it's 5 minutes a day. Just start writing, developing a relationship with yourself. It will transform your life. If you think it's a waste of time, you don't realize the power that you have by putting your thoughts on paper. And that's the other thing I would say is don't do it. You can do it if you're out and you get an impulse or a brilliant idea, put it on your phone. But otherwise, get a pen and paper because there's something visceral that happens when you actually build it into your nervous system by writing it down. That is the power. I don't care how great technology gets. I don't care if AI transforms every aspect of life. The ability for us to pick up a pen and paper and put our thoughts down is one of the most foundational elements to transforming your life, bar none, bar none.
Yes, go for it. But before we wrap up our discussion, Mr. David, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Movie 101 Review. Movie 101 Review is created to empower movies itself with my co-host, Mr. Bob Lemond. And please do listen to our latest episode. We talk about the Oscar. So please do listen, Movie 101 Review, wherever you listen your podcast. So, in what ways does the book challenge readers to take action toward their dreams?
Yeah, you get to the point where you realize you get to participate in your rescue. You get to create the life of your dreams. No one can do that for you. And you might have someone open doors for you. The greatest challenge is when you find the door that you're going to open and figure out how to get it open. Like the greatest challenge is you becoming a bigger version of yourself to impact lives, to transform the planet, to make a contribution and impact because only you can. You have lived your life, it's completely and uniquely yours. Your skills, your passions are all uniquely yours. Become more, grow more, contribute more. And you see, as you do, that's the greatest fulfillment in life. When you light people up with what you've done or what you've written or what you've said or the photographs you've taken or the movie you made, it is transformative. It's absolutely transformative.
Yes, people, if you have talents, please do share to the world, contribute it like Mr. David Richards. So, thank you so much, Mr. David Richard. We are looking forward for more and more empowering books like Whiskey and Yoga. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Absolutely. You can find me on davidrichardsauthor.com. I'm on Instagram at David Richards Author as well.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. David Richard because, as I said, if you support him, more and more David Richards to come. So, Mr. David, thank you so much for your time.
Daniel, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
More to come, people. See you soon. So I'm inviting you again, Mr. David. If you have a new book to be talk about, please do come